Good morning, everybody. Good Friday the 13th morning, actually. It won't be a scary meeting, I'm hoping. So, anyway, I'd like to declare the meeting of the Budget Committee to order. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Great, seeing none. I want to also welcome Councillor Burnside to his first meeting of the Budget Committee. And welcome. Councillor Nunziata is also the new member, and she's not here this morning, but welcome. And I'm sure you'll enjoy the journey on Budget Committee over the next couple of months. So we'll go to, we have two items. Confirmation, yeah, sorry, confirmation of the minutes. Councillor Campbell will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we have two items today. BU 21.1, the operating variance report for the 3-month period ending March 31st, 2016. We'll begin with that. Are there any questions? Oh, sorry, you're right. You know what? We have a speaker. Now, Tim McGuire has put his name down to speak. I know he's not here yet. My suggestion, as I've already said, this item will be coming to executive, so I would suggest give him notice to come before executive. He'll be able to bring the same remarks to executive. So there are no speakers to the item. Are there questions of staff? Yeah, we'll do with Tim. Are there any questions of staff on the item? We'll begin with Councillor Carroll.
Well, yes, maybe I can make Mr. McGuire happy by asking staff if they would like to comment on the piece of correspondence that we got from the bargaining unit. Because it really speaks to certainly any of the divisions where there are 79 members, but the issue of looking at gapping at this point, where there are vacancies, staff don't really, or council, I should say, doesn't really turn their mind to it until summer comes. And then they're wondering where the people they thought would be there in Parks and Rec aren't there. So I'm wondering if staff want to speak to this concept of why don't we honestly look at the vacancies and really speak to it in the context of what should be our overall workforce development strategy.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, there are always a level of vacancies that you will see in the variance reports. However, we don't believe that the vacancies are reflective of a chronic problem in filling vacancies. In fact, we don't have a problem filling vacancies generally. There may be some niche jobs that are harder to fill, but what you do see is a large organization, a very large organization, with a large majority of our positions filled from within. So 75 to 80% of positions filled internally. That means when you go to fill a position from within, you now have a domino effect and you create another vacancy elsewhere. So when you're seeing the quarterly vacancy reports, what you're seeing in the first quarter and then you're seeing a level of vacancies in the second quarter, they're not the same vacancies. It's different vacancies that have arisen over time. There are a number of strategies that we've put in place in the past 2-3 years in particular to try and address the time it takes to fill vacancies, working closely with hiring managers, and we've been able to improve the time. We have also taken steps to anticipate where we know vacancies will arise. So, you know, if we're going to fill a senior planner from within with a planner and then have a vacancy in planner, we're doing ongoing job postings so that we always have the applications coming in. That's one example. So that is a comment that I can give you in general. If you had a specific question about a division's vacancy level, you know, you might be able to look closer and give you more specific information.
So planning is one very good example, but I have a growing frustration because there's and perhaps it's unfair to land this question on human resources, but it ends up being necessary because it is across the board that at this time of year, when we find positions haven't been hired yet, from HR, where the process unfolds, we hear, no, it's not that we're having trouble, but when we get to the end of the year and we're actually engaging in the following year's budget process, from the various divisions, we say, well, how come you're down the positions we gave you last year? At the end of the year, the answer we get is, well, we'd like to be, we meant to hire those people, but we're just having trouble getting them through the process and getting the hiring done. Planning it took 2 years to get the 30 planners that we had in fact built into the budget. So we get two different answers depending on whether we're talking about the mid-year variance report or we're into the budget process, and depending on whether we're talking to HR or we're talking to the actual directors and GMs of the divisions. So now I'm wondering, is the issue that your process in HR has gotten better and you can post if people want, because there's lots of internal response, and so if you want to hire, you can hire, but in order to meet targets, divisions are waiting later and later into the year to even tell HR they want to hire that position. Is that what's going on here? Is the gapping more of a budgetary thing, and so the hires are possible, but they're just waiting till later and later and later?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the one comment I would say in Q1, when we do add additional staff, in the last few years we have added additional planning staff.
Or even retirements.
Or retirements,
Yeah.
because they will often happen. When the budget doesn't get approved till, this year was February 17th, it's most likely that on March 31st, those positions will still be vacant, because they can't hire any new ones until the budget gets approved at council. So you will get some of that happening in Q1.
So then my question actually goes even higher up. When you see this variance report, by the time it gets to financial planning, and by the time it gets to the 3 DCMs, do you look at the variance report at this point in the year and say, okay, get going, because we don't want to have this conversation again when we start into the budget process in the fall?
Through you, Mr. Chair, when I look at the entire Q1 variance report, operating and capital, my comment is always, let's get going. Absolutely.
Right. So you're not saying to them, good on you, that gives me a surplus.
No.
You want them to proceed with whatever we allotted them in the budget.
Council has allocated resources to deliver programs and outcomes, and that is always a focus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Campbell, questions?
So we have December 31st number for the city and all of the agencies, but we don't have it for the TTC. Why is that?
Sorry, the TTC numbers for the vacancies are available?
No. For page 7, it's just the variance, the ridership and revenue. It's on page 7, second last paragraph.
So the variance report, through you, Mr. Chair, the variance report prepared by the TTC, the ridership numbers are down to budget.
But the question is, why don't we have it to the end of March? Because this is only it shows only to the end of February.
I'm just being told they are a month behind, but they have done their projection to year end. And while there is a shortfall right now, they're confident that they can deal with that shortfall and are projecting a year end on budget, no variance.
Well, they did the same thing last year, and they weren't on budget.
Sorry, through you, the last 2 years, they have reported a favorable variance. Okay. I don't know if I can report it. I have seen a preliminary 2015 year end. I'm not sure if they've reported it to the board yet, though.
So the question is, why are they a month behind? We're into May. Everyone else is reported to the end of March. I mean, I don't understand why we aren't insisting that they provide those numbers.
I'm being told that every process they are a month behind, but that is something that I can discuss with their CFO, Vince Rodo.
Okay, thank you. And then in regard to the MLTT, there is a positive variance of 17 million, which is 17 million higher than a year ago because we budgeted it flat. What is that in percentage terms? Do you know that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so it's 17.5 million on gross revenues of 525.
Oh, Okay.
So that
Well,
would,
no, but I mean, you don't have a year-to-date number. We're
our projection for year-to-date is around 18 to 20 million. That's what we're including. We do also have, if you want, we do also have April numbers, and that's why we're saying April came in strong and about another month, another million. So that's why we're saying 18 to 20 million for year end.
So if okay, so it says here we're 17 million ahead, so will that translate into 60 or 70 million ahead of last year? Is that what we're thinking, or is it hard to tell?
I mean, it's hard to tell, given the inherent fluctuations and growth in the real estate market, both in prices and in transactions. I can't say with any certainty what it will be at the end of the year. We are working, though, on our budget planning going forward with, that 18 to 20 million dollars that we have realized in the first quarter and even into
Okay.
April.
All right, that's all, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Any other questions? Seeing none, any speakers to the item at all? I'm sorry, speakers? Yeah, to the first one. Councillor Carroll?
Yes, I have great sympathy for the motion being suggested in the correspondence we got from the bargaining unit. And maybe for different reasons. I have a little more optimism than this reflects in terms of hiring strategies. It's gradual, but I'm seeing a change and some improvements to the process. Certainly, divisional staff are less grumbly about it than they were, at its height 3 years ago. But I'm inclined to commit today to come to executive to back up the budget chief if you were to move this motion there. I think it's really important for the whole executive, for the chairs of the committees, to know that this is being moved and that we are compiling this information, because the three nugget points in this motion are the endless conversation we have every budget process, whether with the members who've been to the detailed review, but pretty much every time in the budget committee, if you think about it, with our guests. Our colleagues who are outside the budget committee generally come, and these are the questions they're asking over and over again. And so I really think a lead into the budget process would be to, if the concerns with these things are urban myths, let's get it in a report and put it to bed. If there are various problems, and we do need to be taking a look at whether or not, in fact, the people plan we adopted years ago, the talent strategy is actually properly integrated with our efficiency exercise, so that we're being realistic about it. I think we ought to give staff the opportunity to do it. But first of all, Mr. McGuire would like to speak to it, and he'll have to do that at executive. But I think moving it there also flags for all your fellow chairs of committees, our Mr. Chair, that we're putting this all together for you in one report. So it will be a great lead-in to the following year's budget process. And as we know, our budgets now do go in draft form to standing committees. And so to have this created and have them look at it before standing committee questions are asked, because there again, the gapping question and answer rises up in every standing committee. Let's let staff speak to it specifically, but I think it would be a stronger action to move it in executive. As to MLTT, my colleague mentioned it in the increase, and I was heartened by that the night before, and then I woke up this morning and Globe and Mail Real Estate is saying we're running out of stock, and while the prices are still going up, you're going to see way fewer transactions this year. And as we know, that's a big part of our growth is the numbers of transactions. There's just been such volume. So while there'll still be lots of condos to go around, a bellwether that things are changing is Integral House that's been on the market for 20 million is still sitting there, hasn't sold yet. So those types of boons to our land transfer tax were great. That part's slowing down. So I'm inclined to say, don't think of that as surplus we can use to balance next year's budget. Because we may have a really different picture at the end of the year. And in any case, we started last year's budget process with the city manager's conversation that we shouldn't be counting on 500 million to balance the budget anyway. We should be putting, at least 100 million of that somewhere else, because it's not a sustainable funding model anyway. Those are my comments. I'm not going to move the motion today, but if it's being moved at executive, I'll be there to speak to it.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other speakers to the item? Seeing none, all in favor? BU 21.1? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, on to the next item. BU 21.2, Capital Variance Report for the 3-month period ending March 31st, 2016. Questions of staff? Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, I don't start questioning spending rate at this time of year. The early variance report doesn't tell you much. But there's a little comment in there. We're closing out some completed capital projects and returning the money to the funding sources from whence they came, except that one of them is 10 million that would go back to the province. So hang on a second. I don't remember that always being our practice. Is it because of the amount of money here? And secondly, when that happens, is it automatic return, or is it a call to the Ministry of Finance to say, we have all these other partnership projects, something closed out, we've got 10 million that came from you, do you want us to apply it to other things in the list? Do we go through that exercise first?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Generally, especially in the last 5 years, grant agreements do require, if there's underspending, that they be returned.
Right.
Generally. I'd have to look into the specifics of that particular project, but generally,
It doesn't say whether it all came from
in the
one
last
or not.
few years, that's what's been happening.
So in a case like this where we've gone through the exercise and that 10 million may be spread over 20 projects, do we have the opportunity to talk to them about it, or do they just watch our reporting and then call us and say we can't wait to get that $10 million check?
Well, we would follow whatever the grant agreements say that we must do. Right? Most of this stuff is in agreements. Just like, when a project goes over, we ask for more money, most of the agreements always say it's capped. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Campbell?
So in the preparation of this report for the first quarter, what actions does staff do with this information? What does the city manager, what does Mr. Rossini do? What does because you mentioned earlier that, you have a desire that people get on with it, but internally what happens?
So, Mr. Rossini has 2 hats. I have a deputy city manager hat and a CFO hat. As my deputy city manager hat, I look at our results, particularly in IT, in financial services, which are IT-related projects, corporate, and facilities. And, we have discussions around our senior management table. I have dashboards that we get that we monitor, and I am on my guys for capital delivery. And so, for example, in facilities, we've done a reorg on the project management side because we were tracking in and around that 60%, and we want to get to 80% completion. So we've taken some specific measures in Josie's shop and Sunil Sharma's shop and facilities management and design and construction to try to move the markers up. We are also doing monthly reporting, much more rigorous reporting on the IT side, for example. We've instituted in the last 2 years a brand new IT capital reporting process. Whereas at one point in time we were having 60% of projects reporting in, I'm happy to report now we've got 95% of projects reporting in on a monthly basis. So I am on my guys to stay on top of that. And I know through my colleagues in the other clusters, they are doing the same to drive better capital delivery performance Like in Lou's shop, transportation is moving the marker as well. So as deputy city managers, that's what we're doing. As CFO, I'm basically doing the same thing. I do look at this and am worried that when we consistently have 5 to 10% delivery in the first quarter, we need to do a little better. So we are looking at what are ways that we can do to start getting ahead of projects earlier and not just have it to wait on the budget being approved, which is, in February.
Right.
There are some municipalities have gone to pre-approving portions of the capital budget to move the marker forward.
What's the, sorry, go ahead.
Josie has also worked with the divisions to bundle contracts to move them forward faster, to budget projects as programs and move those whole entire programs faster, as opposed to if I've got asphalting of 5 roofs to do, let's bundle them together and get those out faster. So there are things on the operational side that we are doing as well that Josie is working on with the divisions as well.
Okay, so what, if we have this budgeting lag and delivery lag, why do they not budget for Q1 projects to be underway? Why do they not budget for that in the prior year?
If the spending is going to occur, right, you wouldn't budget in 15 something that you don't think you're going to spend until 2016, because that just makes your 15 results look worse. So we're a cash flow budget. We budget when we think we're going to expend the funds. And Q1, we're always behind the 8 ball because the budget's not going to get approved till sometime between January 30th and February 30th.
And so what's the cost to this? Aside from delay in completion, are there other associated costs with that?
There should not be, because in preparation of the budgets, people understand that the budget isn't going to be approved January 1st. So they should be taking that into consideration. And you would hope that they should be taking that into consideration in the development in the preparation and the numbers of the budgets that they put together.
Right. If I just may add, I mean, if you look at our budget, almost a third of the budget is funding that's being carried forward from the prior year where they haven't completed that. So usually in that first quarter, they're focusing in on the completion of the projects that are still underway as they're ramping up the new projects that council's approving through the plan. So, and with multi-year approvals and contracts, there's that ability to keep those at least previously approved projects, on the board, I guess, and moving. So they're balancing both things that haven't been completed or that are multi-year, for which there's focus on completing, and then the new startup of other things. And, we look at these results, and as part of the next budget's process, we're also looking at their spending capacity, their readiness, trying to ensure that we're cash flowing funds based on how ready those projects are, and then we're trying to match the cash flows to the actual spending and the project scheduling, because that's really key. And we're getting better, and that's getting more refined as we go.
That's it, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Carol? Yeah.
No, I've already asked a question. You didn't have any questions? I love the dashboard format. I'm loving it. But I'm just wondering, just so that I'm clear, because you know what councilors are going to look at? They're going to swirl through them and look at Parks and Rec. Us councillors loves our parks capital. Well, I'm just anticipating the need of the councillors outside this committee. When you see the red in parks, is that a symptom of moving to the dashboard format? When they say 6 months or more behind, and therefore we're coloring this in red, does that mean 6 months behind what staff hoped they would do? We hope to have this off the ground in June, or is it because they haven't started it now and they're reporting in the first quarter, you have to make it red because of the technological format?
So it's about the spend rate. So actually on page 4 of the report, it identifies what green, yellow, and red mean.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the spending rate as a result of what's being projected. So red is less than 50% of the budget spent, or of course, more than 100% of the budget being spent.
Right, but for instance, outdoor recreation is red. How would we ever expect them to have spent any money in outdoor recreation by the end of the first quarter? So this is what I mean, but is this a symptom of the technology or the department?
For you, Mr. Chair, that's about the year-end projection, not about the quarter spend.
Oh, okay. So there are things they hope to be doing in May that they won't. So this is what brings me back to, and it relates to Councillor Campbell's questions. I long for the days when we were adopting capital in December. It's a big, to go back would be a big shift, but it does address that symptom. How difficult would it be to look at doing that? There's a long list of benefits to it, and I know there's hardship, but there is the issue of, first of all, councillors can actually read the capital program and understand it because they're not being overwhelmed by both budgets at that time. But it does allow, particularly those divisions, and maybe you could speak to this, where there has to be, even though we've adopted in the budget, there then needs to be follow-up interaction. I spent an hour yesterday morning with 2 members of staff and a couple of project champions from the PB pilot before they could proceed with a small project that was adopted. There's a certain amount of interaction with the community and the councillor that has to take place in public realm unit and in some parts of transportation, in PF&R. And if we adopt the budget in December, those meetings are not happening in April and May, they're happening in January and February. And then the tender's out in March. What would be the really good reason why we can't go back to that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there are some municipalities that do that. They tend to be smaller. Most of the larger municipalities in the GTA do not do that anymore. The complexities around the capital budget and how it drives the overall financial planning is huge. So if you look at our budget, and one of the main drivers that we're saying is, look, we got this huge, it was $22 billion shortfall over 10 years. You're going to see an even bigger number in the financial plan because we've added some more transit projects. You need to look at that in the context of the wider picture and come up with a fiscal plan and a financial plan around the entire budget. So looking at one piece in isolation of the other, I think does a disservice to councillors who are trying to manage the entire city and see what are their priorities. And capital is a huge driver on the overall budget. So if I'm coming to you in December and saying, here, approve this capital budget with this increase in debt charges and CFC, and it has this huge tax increase or tax impact, and you haven't seen the other part of the budget, the operating part, realistically, how can you make that decision? So I think it's untenable to bring the capital budget ahead of the operating. I think council, budget committee, executive committee need to see both pieces together.
Can I ask one follow-up, though, then? I hear those arguments very strongly now, but if we do a good job of our long-term fiscal plan, if we do a good job of the city manager's biggest wish that we actually turn our minds to our funding model. If we have a long-term overall picture, much more nailed down and adopted, could we come back and look at this then?
I mean, that's always something that we could look at in the future, but we are not in a position, honestly, right now to be able to do that.
I hear you.
But, that's not, I mean, I wouldn't close the door completely on it, but I think it would be difficult for this municipality.
For now, we don't have that.
There are things that I want to do that we can move the marker forward, like some municipalities have done, moved to pre-approvals of the capital budget. So for example, regular programs that have a regular aspect to them, like road resurfacing, water main replacements, that aren't going to go from something to zero. Some municipalities have moved, let's pre-approve a quarter or a third of that budget, so that you can move on tendering and be ahead of the game.
Yes.
That's something that we could look at.
So that, if you looked at it and through the lens of, is this going to require a certain amount of interaction in the community and politically, that might be what you'd use to determine where you would try the pre-approval practice. I'm happy to talk about that on any rainy day.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any speakers to the item? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. And I believe that is it. We're done. Motion to adjourn, always in order. Councillor Campbell, have a great weekend, all.
Half an hour on the dot. 36 of it.